before I share something, David is new with us, and what we do here is we have a conversation. So we encourage you to ask questions and feel free to make comments. And in this particular instance, I'm going to draw from Rosemary Ruther's Goddesses and the Divine Feminine, a Western religious history. And in this particular part, she tells us, now I may get these names wrong, I may mispronounce them, but I don't think that will hurt anything. But she tells us that Namu, the goddess of the watery deep, is portrayed as the original mother of the gods. And I recognize the style of this name and with the next one as coming from the breadbasket of civilization, from the early Mesopotamian cultures. And the thing with being the mother of the gods, Namu would also be considered the mother of humankind, because those early religions, those early ancestors viewed life differently than what we do now. And she tells us that, and this is a difficult pronunciation here, Nin Hersag represented the power of the ground and was the birthing goddess among the primal deities. And what this may indicate is that from the earth we are given life. From the earth we are born. Now there are some areas in the Gospels where Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. And what he is saying by that is that he was born of the earth. And from the earth he ascended into heaven. And from that we can take that we are born of the earth before we are born into heaven. And there are a variety of ways that we can take this. And it's for you to decide how to take this in, because all knowledge, all information is always going to be relative to your understanding. And I would like to say thank you for allowing me to share that with you. Today's talk may not necessarily center on mothers, but it's about women, ladies, I should say. And, often we ask questions, and just as often when we ask those questions, we typically get unsatisfactory answers. And we shouldn't accept them. If they're unsatisfactory, we should not accept them. We should continue asking questions, continue exploring them. Because in our quest for wisdom, and that's what we're looking for, is wisdom, because the knowledge that we gather, the information that we gather, when we use that to nurture others, to inspire them, to encourage them, it becomes wisdom. And we should be flexible in that. We should be flexible in our beliefs. And we're going to look at some of these roles. We're all familiar with the station given to women within the Bible and some of these biblical teachings. With the exception, there was one exception that they made, which was Mary, the mother of Jesus. And the rest of them, they kind of did they kind of put them down and everything else. Widows, mothers, they were treated slightly better than sisters or aunts, particularly those who were unwed. But this was not always the case. And it's this that I would like to remind us of. Because we're so caught up with this idea of a patriarchal system, because that's what we grew up with. And in our desire to look for something different, to look for something better, we might move to the other extreme, into a matriarchal system. And what they're finding, what archaeology is finding, is that this was not the case. We didn't move from the one extreme to another extreme. We moved from something that was already blended. And it's this blended potential it would like us to consider. And as I said with the New Testament, by the time the New Testament was put together, this relationship had already been established. But when the Old Testament was being formulated, many of us would think that, oh, yeah, they've got that same idea. But it didn't happen that way. At least not from what they're finding. And when we look through the Old Testament, we see these different hints that just kind of don't fit right. After all, we're all familiar with the story of Eve and Adam, and how Eve is supposed to be the downfall of humankind. Now, that's just not fair. But that, it just wasn't always like that. And in our first little hint of this it's still in Genesis, but it comes with Hagar. Now, I'm hoping that you remember who Hagar is, but if you don't, she was the handmaid of Sarai, or Sarah, the wife of Abraham. And the incident that I'm referring to is when she left Abraham and Sarah to strike out on her own because of how she was so mistreated. An angel, a soul, appears to her and tells her that within her womb was a great seed, and that it would be multiplied. Just to give you a clue as to how this was going to be multiplied, we can look across the pond and see the Islamic nations. That is her seed that was multiplied. But the thing is here that if this whole thing of the patriarchal leadership were fully in place, then this soul would not have put it that way. The soul would have said something more along the lines of your seed through Abraham would be multiplied. And it's these little incidences that are easily overlooked. And I just want to take a moment to perhaps get your thoughts about this. Just this little incident. And, well, I see Reverend Bacon is still with us. So maybe I will call upon her and she could share her thoughts on this a little bit, if she could.
You probably don't want me to do this. Women have gotten a bad rap, as Reverend Philip put it, but we carry the life. We are the life bearers. And, we read in the Bible where if a woman commits adultery, they're stoned to death. And we think, wow, that's pretty bad. But the reason for that was they didn't have DNA back then. So everything went down, we carried the father's line, is what we did. So if she committed adultery and there was a child that was conceived out of wedlock, you were actually carrying another bloodline. And that's why the punishment was so severe. The oldest child got twice as much. And, it was very important to them at the time. And I feel it's still very important to know who the father of your children are. But that's one of the reasons why they were punished by stoning to death was a usual punishment back then. But we are the life givers. When children do something wrong and everybody can see what they're doing, but the mother doesn't, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because in every lie, there's a thread of truth, and every mother looks for that truth in their child. We are life givers, and we are going to support our children. That's what parents do. That's what mothers do. And that's why it takes us longer to see than it takes others, is because we find that thread of truth and we hang on to it. There's never a lie told without a thread of truth somewhere, no matter how small it might be. I remember reading, the young boy's been acquitted now, or the case was dropped or whatever happened, but he was like 9 years old. And there was this lawsuit that he raped a girl, a slightly older girl. And they interviewed the mother, and she says, I know to the public he looks like a monster, but to me, he's my son, he's my baby. And that's why God created mothers. Everybody needs to be okay in somebody's eyes. And that's what I kind of have to say about mothers today.
Thank you. And, one of the nice things about the First Spiritual Church of Prayer is we welcome all thoughts and all opinions. So don't worry about it. And if I could call upon Sandy, what might your thoughts be?
Well, excuse me. I haven't really formulated a lot of thought about this. I totally understand what Reverend Bacon was talking about, and she's so right about that with mothers. We always see that thread of good. We always see it, no matter what. I think historically, I would agree that women have been treated like second class people and treated less, just the word less. You're just less, and you'll never be more. Society has always told us that. Of course, we aren't buying it anymore, which is a good thing. But I guess I'm happy that I'm here now instead of experiencing that way back, the prejudice. But I see. I don't know if I want to look to the future. I see a lot of good for women coming up in the future. I think we're at a historic place. we are in a good place, and I guess, and I agree. I think Reverend Phillips said about the blending. I think that's the best way to put it. I like that, because I think each gender brings that blending to fruition. and creates the whole. Okay. But I don't, I don't like to put, I don't like to put the weight, the balance, to me, that's the balance. That's just the way I feel about it.
Thank you. And one more. David, would you like to offer anything?
You put me on the hot spot. I just think that, without mothers, none of us would be here. And, it boils down to, whether you want to feel superior or not. And, the male typically wants to be the top dog and superior and be in control, and to release that, it's hard to do, but it's happening, and the women's rights movement and all the things that have been done to put the woman on an equal basis with man, and yet we're not equal. We're different. We think different, and so we can never be really totally equal, but we can be each as we truly are, which is what the real goal is. God gives, no two people are alike, and God has given us each specific talents and things that we do well, and other things we don't do well, and we're all necessary in this world. I don't remember who said it. I think maybe it was Thomas Merton, but the saying was, what you do today may not be very important, but it's very important that you do it. And if everybody stayed home tomorrow and didn't go to work, the world would be in total chaos. So we each have a purpose, and it's up to each of us to find out what it is.
Sounds good.
Reverend Philip, I do have something that I want to say. I want to say that one of the most important things that a man can do for his children is to continue to love their mother. And the other thing that I do want to say is that being a mother was nothing what I thought it was going to be. Absolutely nothing. Uh-oh, the cat wants to go by John. Okay, that's all I have to say.
This next part that I want to share with you demonstrates how important women were, ladies, prophetesses. Because in another incident, they talk about the woman from Endor. And she played a very important role because Saul, who was a king at the time, he wanted to know the outcome of this battle that he was facing. So he went to his seers, and that's how they put it, seers. And, they couldn't provide an answer for him. He's got all these men here, and they could not give him an answer. So he called for a woman. He was very specific. He said that. These words were a woman with a familiar, I believe is the term that he used. And, at this time, women were very prominent as prophets, prophetesses. There is huge amounts of archaeological evidence that supports this. So, as you can see, women were well respected. not only as prophets, but as healers as well. And I'm going to ask Beth if she has any thoughts that she might like to share with us.
Yeah, where did everything go wrong?
Well, they've got several theories for that. And just to be brief about it, one of the theories that is put forth with that is that when the Aryans, or the northern people, migrated south into the Fertile Crescent, or Mesopotamia, into China, and into northern Africa and those regions in there, they brought with them their beliefs and their male dominance. But it's not something that happened overnight. It was something that occurred over centuries. So it was a slow thing, and we'll touch briefly on that at the end of this. And Sharon, I don't believe I've called on you yet. Do you have any thoughts you would like to share with this?
Well, there was an article in the paper this morning about Afghanistan and how now the Taliban has made it a law that the women have to be completely burqa'd head to toe, and the only thing that can be seen is their eyes. So I look at this, and we all knew, I mean, I knew this was going to happen. I knew they were going to close the schools. Any progress that was made when we were there is now going backward. And I don't understand it. I feel like, and I made this comment this morning, I feel like this is being done because, this is my opinion, this is how it appears to me, that the men, they have no control over their own whatever, emotions, urges, whatever. They have no control. So if they see my hand, and something happens to the woman, it's the woman's fault. If she is assaulted or whatever because her hand is showing, or her ankle, or part of her face or her hair, it's not the man's fault, it's the woman's fault that she is assaulted or whatever. So I get pretty fired up about this when I read things like this, because I thought, here we go. It's her fault because she's a woman. So she can't, she has to be, I don't know, protected. I don't know what, put on a pedestal. They imply that that's what it is, that they put them on a pedestal, but I don't think it is. I think it's just a whole power thing. It's a whole control and power. And so that reading this morning just, kind of, it just takes women back, hopefully, and I don't know why. It's just interesting in the world, because we have, no other culture, I don't think, does this. No other religion does this to their women, that not so blatant, it's not so obvious. I mean, there are other controls over women by other religions, but this one is really extreme to me. I mean, it's the most extreme. So it's certainly not progressing women, as they're not, obviously these women are very much less in society than than they were even a year ago. I mean, it's talk about going backwards.
Taliban.
Yeah,
She's talking about the Taliban.
so,
I agree.
yeah.
I agree. And I've got concerns about America.
Well, I do too. I do too.
It's not looking good.
No,
It's just not looking good.
I know.
And part of that reason I suspect is because we remember our mothers fighting for rights.
Yes.
We remember things that, or at least I do, remember things that my mother did for me, like get me a charge card. Don't ever let that charge card go because you'll never find one again because women couldn't have one. 1988, I was doing a reading for Janet Reno, who was in Florida. I forget her position, but she had bodyguards. She'd fly here to Chicago for readings from me. And she could not buy a car. She was telling me, I'm trying to buy a car, but I don't have my husband's signature, so I cannot buy a car. 1988.
Wow.
We're looking, these young people don't understand that. Oh, the 50s look so nice.
Mhm.
You know, they don't get it. And I'm concerned about that. But
Right.
I do what I can. I look at what the people that I vote for, I look at what they represent, and then I cast my vote for the one that's most like-minded.
Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a lot of uncertainty, and you know, I feel like we will come through this. I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know if I'll be here to see it, but I feel like we will eventually. But it's every little inch is hard fought. Every step is hard fought. So anyway, I hope that wasn't off the topic too much, but you said something in the early part about Abraham and the handmaid and all, and I maybe I'm forgetting my story a little bit, but you said it was because that her seed was the nation of Islam. Was that what you said?
Yes.
As opposed, but then you said something about Abraham, because anyway, I think maybe you don't remember quite the whole story on that.
Just to be brief, within the Quran, it talks about the same incident as is in Genesis with Sarah and Abraham and Hagar and the promise of God.
Okay.
And from there came the patriarchs of Islam. And that's how it's recorded. Now, I don't have the Quran in front of me and to read the verse, but it's there, and that's where they trace their origins to, just as Judaism traces their origins to Abraham, because it opens with Abraham when he leaves, I think it was Haran, to travel throughout Mesopotamia, and it was later that he became Abraham. So it's as though they are setting up a difference there, implying a difference between the two. So, but one of the things I'd like to mention is that it's difficult to comment on things that happen in other cultures if we don't know the culture. And all we can rely on is our culture, what we're familiar with, as a reference point. And I believe that may be what you were implying there, that that lack of understanding, from our perspective, it should be different, but we don't know their culture.
You're right. You're right. You're
And
right.
for them, it could be how they protect their women.
Right. That's very possible. To us, I mean, to me, it just seems so incredibly oppressive. that, you can't do anything without the man's approval or his permission. So really, you're kind of like a slave in a lot of ways, because you really
Yeah.
don't have any rights at all. So
So-
but I don't understand. I don't know it. I don't know that much about it. It just seems awful.
Yeah, because if I recall, I haven't read the Quran as extensively as I've read the Bible, but I believe there are areas in there where they speak of protecting their women
Okay.
and from outsiders.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and just if you got something you would like to add, Rachel.
Well, this conversation has gone in many different directions, from women's rights and equality to the love of a mother and some historical stories. I guess for me personally, and I would assume many of us think of Mother's Day on a more personal level. We think of our mothers, we think of our grandmothers, we think of, if you are a mother, yourself. And, not, some of us come from mothers with borderline personality disorder, narcissistic mothers, underage mothers. I was an underage mother, single mother. And some healthy mothers, wonderful mothers. But anybody can create, just about. And we are, some of us are luckier than others to who we were born to. But I guess I try to keep the viewpoint that everything is a gift, even hardships and difficulties, and everything gives you something, some kind of gift that you can take forward. So that's kind of my thoughts on Mother's Day.
We are a diverse group. and that's healthy. I feel that's healthy, and I agree. We went in a variety of directions, not what I had anticipated, but
My apologies for going off track on that. I don't know why I was impressed to
Oh.
talk about it. It just,
you're fine.
I don't know.
Well,
But
I think that women's equality and rights definitely has a spot at the table with Mother's Day,
right,
Yeah.
right. And on a positive, on a little more positive note, I did want to say Happy Mother's Day to our mothers in spirit and grandmothers in spirit, because I didn't get a chance to do that. So I just want to do that. Mothers and sisters-in-laws and cousins that have all gone that were mothers. So I just wanted to say Happy Mother's Day to all of them. So, yes.
Very good. And I'm going to skip the next section and go right to during the time of Elijah, Elisha, and Hosea, there was a reform movement that was taking place. This is where all these changes occurred. And during this Deuteronomic Reform, anything that was seen as detracting from the new religion, because that's what this was a new religion. There was a huge competition between this formation of this new religion and of the older religions, that it was they sought to separate themselves. And through this, because they have found evidence where there existed a unity of the God that we're familiar with and the goddess that we look for in the past. They have found evidence that there was a time, even in these early Judaic writings, where they were blended. And that's the point that I wanted to bring across, was that there's, like everything else that we have encountered, there's large amounts of information edited out for whatever reason. But, we should be satisfied with the knowledge that this has not always been this way, and we can feel good about remembering that. Remember when Jesus had appeared the first time, he appeared to Mary, whom it is said that he loved more than all the others, including Peter. Does anyone have any last comments they would like to make? And again, happy Mother's Day and happy Ladies' Day. And thank you for allowing me to share this with you.